Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, we discussed how, due to the rampaging Milim's destruction, Rimuru decided to lead her to the barren land. However, this action played right into Feldway's hands. Feldway, lurking in the shadows, took advantage of Rimuru's battle with Milim and once again used Regalia Dominion to control her. Then, with a single move, Chronosaltation, Feldway sent Rimuru hurtling to the ends of time and space. Now, with Rimuru's disappearance, how will the Monster Federation's executives react? In this episode, we will witness the despair of the group, the madness of Diablo, the reliability of Zegion, and the fierce battle between Dagruel, Veldora, and Shion. So, let's get started. Rimuru has vanished. Upon hearing the news, the entire Monster Federation was shaken to its core. Diablo, Zegion, Kamara, the recently awakened Benimaru, Gabiru, Geld, Ranga, Testarossa who rushed back from Ingracia Kingdom, Ramaris, Beretta, Gabda, and Apito, everyone who could move, except for those currently engaged in battle, gathered at the Labyrinth's command center. Benimaru repeatedly asked Suwei, who brought the devastating news, to confirm its truth. He couldn't believe that Rimuru-sama had disappeared. Suwei clenched his fists in frustration, expressing that he hadn't even had the chance to protect Rimuru. But despite this, no one in the room blamed him. After all, facing both a rampaging Milim and the powerful Feldway, the outcome would have been the same regardless of who was there. This wasn't the time for blame or complaints. The entire command center was enveloped in a heavy silence. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. Suwei, who had always maintained his calm, furiously smashed the table to pieces. He couldn't stop blaming himself, his heart overwhelmed with pain. Next to him, Testarossa closed her eyes in silence. Yes, Testarossa felt powerless. It was because of her own weakness that her beloved Rimuru-sama had to join the battle. The unshakable guilt weighed heavily on Testarossa's heart, and this feeling spread among everyone present. As a result, no one even knew how to offer Suwei any comfort. At that moment, Diablo's voice cut through the tense atmosphere, mocking Suwei's self-importance, stating that even if Suwei had done something, it would have only added another casualty. His disdainful and cold tone was harsh, but Suwei and the others knew that this was the reality, leaving them unable to argue back, silently accepting it instead. Testarossa, however, criticized Diablo for his harsh words, pointing out that even if Diablo had been present, the outcome would have been the same. She stared at Diablo with a strong-willed gaze, understanding his true intentions. Testarossa was incredibly perceptive and realized that Diablo was trying to provoke anger in the others by playing the villain, as letting despair take over would only lead everyone into further hopelessness. Diablo's goal was to stir up their emotions, preventing them from being consumed by despair. She even guessed Diablo's next move, to incite dissatisfaction among the group so they would expel him, allowing him to go alone to challenge Feldway. Diablo, having been seen through, displayed a look of resentment, cursing this annoying woman in his mind. They had known each other for millions of years, and with Testarossa's sharp intellect, she was one of the few who could see through Diablo's true intentions. Despite appearing calm, Diablo was actually deeply mired in despair. He was also plagued with guilt for not finding a way to stay by Rimuru-sama's side, but he struggled to keep himself from going mad. Testarossa, having accurately discerned Diablo's inner turmoil, mercilessly taunted him, saying she had heard how poorly Diablo performed when facing Michael alongside Rimuru-sama, utterly helpless against the time-stopping ability, an embarrassment. Diablo, filled with murderous intent, retorted that Testarossa herself had let a mere small fry escape. The entire command center was suffused with a tense atmosphere, everyone drowning in sadness and despair. Geld and Gabiru remained silent, their expressions heavy. Kamara clenched her fists tightly, while Ramaris looked on the verge of tears, head bowed in silence. In the past, whenever they faced difficulties, Rimuru would always find a way to help, but now Rimuru was gone. If there was any small mercy, It was that the hot-tempered Shion wasn't present, as her influence could have pushed everyone toward making the worst possible decisions, potentially leading to their complete destruction. But of course, that was just one of many possible outcomes. In this situation, there was one person who remained resolute, Zegion. He unfolded his crossed arms and stood up. Zegion scolded everyone for their foolishness, expressing disbelief at how easily they crumbled. He stood firm, his demeanor showing that he had unwavering faith that Rimuru-sama would not perish. Zegion declared that Rimuru-sama's disappearance wasn't something to be overly concerned about because Rimuru-sama was omnipotent and would return, even from the ends of time and space. If Rimuru-sama didn't return, it would be for a good reason. Zegion's firm declaration was exactly what everyone needed to hear, rekindling a spark of hope in their hearts. Zegion continued, saying that everyone was being childish, letting anxiety and fear cloud their judgment. Rimuru-sama hadn't abandoned anyone, and Zegion urged them all to pay closer attention. Even though the soul corridor couldn't be contacted, everyone could still feel Rimuru's blessing within them. Zegion displayed an unwavering posture, and that steadfast belief dispelled the anxieties of those around him. Testarossa, standing nearby, was deeply moved, admiring Zegion's calm and resolute demeanor, and she couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just her, everyone else was also swayed by Zegion's words. Even though they couldn't feel the connection of their souls, it didn't mean that Rimuru-sama had abandoned them. They could still sense the warmth that enveloped them. That was Rimuru's blessing. Some had already noticed that Rimuru's blessing hadn't vanished, but they were still plagued with unease, fearing that this might all be wishful thinking. After all, they believed it was better to have no expectations at all than to hold on to unrealistic hopes. However, this way of thinking was wrong. Zegion emphasized that only by holding on until the very end would the path be revealed. It wasn't too late to worry then, but for now, everyone needed to focus on doing what they could within their abilities. Zegion asserted that they were undergoing a test from Rimuru-sama. Even without fully relying on Rimuru, they shouldn't be so weak. Children who couldn't leave the protection of their parents were destined for destruction. Zegion believed this wholeheartedly. Benimaru nodded vigorously in agreement. He remembered a time long ago when simply losing contact with Rimuru-sama caused him to become unsettled and anxious. He had failed to defend against the assault from the Falmouth Kingdom, resulting in great suffering for his comrades. From that moment, Benimaru had sworn to become the heart and soul of their group, capable of leading even without depending on Rimuru-sama. He vowed that such a tragedy would never happen again. Now, being reminded of that vow by Zegion, Benimaru felt a deep sense of guilt for having momentarily forgotten it. No matter the circumstances, now was the time to fulfill his vow. As the Supreme Commander, Benimaru knew he couldn't show any signs of uncertainty, no matter how uneasy he felt. With a fearless smile, Benimaru declared that this was the moment for everyone to prove themselves so that Rimuru-sama wouldn't have to worry when he returned. Gabda, still as casual as ever, confidently remarked that Rimuru was tough and would come back no matter what. Being the only one among Rimuru's subordinates who could speak without formalities, Gabda's flippant comment drew some dissatisfaction from the others. Gabiru chimed in, admitting that his unease in Rimuru-sama's absence would only lead to being laughed at once Rimuru-sama returned. Geld then put forth a bold hypothesis. Although Suei's information was reliable, and it was true that Rimuru-sama had disappeared, he believed that this was all part of Rimuru-sama's strategy. While it sounded far-fetched, everyone present found this possibility to be quite plausible. Ramaris, swept up in the atmosphere, blurted out that she had always believed in Rimuru and hadn't worried at all. With this, everyone in the labyrinth expressed their hope. Seeing this, Benimaru was deeply moved. It wasn't just him. Everyone had been overly reliant on Rimuru-sama. Benimaru encouraged everyone, stating that while depending on Rimuru-sama might seem fine, it actually meant shifting all responsibility onto him. Now was the perfect opportunity to showcase their own strengths, overcome the challenges, and complete Rimuru-sama's trial. Though his words were simple, they were profound, and each person felt the weight of their own responsibility. Under Benimaru's declaration, everyone nodded firmly in agreement. Diablo sneered, remarking that it seemed his intervention wasn't necessary after all, while Zegion casually noted that Diablo's methods were too heavy-handed and would never have worked. Diablo's intention had been to wake up those who were lost in despair, believing that if they couldn't snap out of it, they weren't worthy of being Rimuru-sama's capable subordinates. Zegion agreed with the sentiment but pointed out that Diablo's approach was too harsh and could easily escalate internal conflicts. Diablo could only smile wryly at Zegion's comment. Everyone returned to their positions, and the large screen showed multiple enemies rapidly advancing on the labyrinth. As Zegion had said, now was not the time for arguments. However, the necessary ritual that Diablo deemed essential, the shift in mindset and understanding of their responsibilities, had been completed. They needed to prove to Rimuru-sama that even in his absence, they would continue to fight on, ready to welcome his return. Next came the planning phase. With Storm Dragon Veldora having already headed to Shion and Ultima's battlefield, that area was no longer a concern. Testarossa decided to go rescue Carrera and Nalim's subordinates. Rimuru asked Diablo about his personal plan. Diablo casually remarked that he had originally intended to eliminate Felway and then offer the world to Rimuru-sama upon his return. However, he suddenly realized that they needed to strengthen the labyrinth's defenses, lest they disobey Rimuru-sama's previous orders. Though Diablo's tone was nonchalant, the seriousness of his words was undeniable. Rimuru caught on to this immediately. Diablo had sensed the danger posed by the invading enemies. On the screen, all the enemies were detected: Vega, Dino, Pico, Gracia, and Mai Furuki, each a member of the 7 heavenly generals, with existence points easily surpassing the millions, and even some in the tens of millions. Even so, Rimuru didn't believe these enemies would be enough to worry Diablo. Rimuru acknowledged that he wasn't in his best condition, but with Zegion also present in the labyrinth, Diablo was free to act as he saw fit. Diablo, however, responded lightly, saying it wasn't a matter of doubting Zegion's strength. It was simply that given the current circumstances, it was important to treat the enemy cautiously. Zegion, unbothered, reassured everyone that he would accomplish his mission. His words carried the firm belief that he would protect everyone in the labyrinth, and his dependability brought comfort to the group. Geld announced that he would take time to properly rest and focus on recovering his strength before coming battles, and Gabru agreed, though he was worried about his newfound lover, Sophia's safety. He understood that the best course of action was to fully accept treatment. With that, the plan was set, and the labyrinth's inhabitants began to take action. Their expressions were filled with determination, their spirits glowing with resolve. They all knew this was the moment to prove their worth, to demonstrate that even without Rimuru-sama, they were strong, capable, and worthy of the names they had been given. This was their time to soar, free from the protection of the one who had bestowed their names, and to earn the praise of Rimuru-sama when he returned. Time rewinds to Shion, Luminous, and Dagruel's battlefield. Dagruel had activated Time Stop, leaving Luminous and Shion utterly helpless. Just as Dagruel's fist was about to deliver the fatal blow to Luminous, Storm Dragon Veldora made a dramatic entrance, blocking the deadly strike. Luminous, now understanding Time Stop, experienced a strange sensation. Seeing Veldora standing there confidently, unafraid even in the face of Dagruel, made her reflect on how foolish her previous despair had been. The tension that accompanied the fear of death evaporated, and an inexplicable sense of relief filled her heart. Of course, Luminous would never admit this to herself. She stubbornly mocked her own stupidity. There was no way she could feel secure just because of Veldora's arrival. That was impossible. But Luminous quickly pushed aside these emerging emotions and refocused on the current situation. Veldora, laughing heartily, performed what he considered a cool entrance, indulging in his usual theatrics. In a world where time had stopped, no one should have been able to hear him except Dagruel. But Veldora didn't care. He had to look impressive in his rare moments of appearance. Luminous, of course, could see everything, though a voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. It was the familiar and troublesome voice of Primordial Purple, Ultima, telling her not to space out. Luminous had been wondering how Veldora could move through the stop time, but now it made sense. Ultima must have been involved. Ultima asked Luminous if she understood what had happened. Luminous admitted that while she wasn't entirely clear on the details, she knew she was temporarily safe. Ultima praised Luminous, remarking that it was impressive for her to sense sounds and hold a conversation on her first experience in a stopped world. Truly a worthy rival. Ultima, though proud and arrogant, was only slightly ahead of Luminous. She still couldn't fully adapt to time stop. She could only communicate and sense her surroundings for now. Ultima sensed that Luminous might be able to interact with infan, the smallest particles that link to the essence of the world, even tinier than spiritron. In this world without light or sound, the only way to perceive anything was to manipulate these infants. Luminous asked Ultima if mastering control over these infants would allow them to move freely in the stop time. Ultima confirmed this with pride, boasting that she had already grasped the feeling. Indeed, Ultima's limbs had begun to regain sensation. Not to be outdone, Luminous refused to let the arrogant Ultima get ahead of her. She concentrated on controlling the unbound infants floating around and within her. After some effort, Luminous managed to slightly move her fingertips. Though they had escaped immediate danger, neither Luminous nor Ultima knew which of the two, Veldora or Dagruel, was stronger. Before the two clashed, they needed to regain full control of their bodies. With that goal in mind, the two began competing fiercely, determined to master time stop. Let's shift our perspective to Dagruel, who was surprised by Veldora's sudden appearance. In a world where time had stopped, executing a precise long-distance space transfer was incomprehensible, even for someone like Dagruel. Veldora, however, earnestly replied that heroes always appear at the most opportune moment. It's common sense. His answer, of course, completely dodged the question, but Dagruel knew Veldora well enough to realize he'd never get the straightforward answer he was looking for. Facing Dagruel, Veldora then made an absurd and foolish suggestion. He asked Dagruel to restart time so that he could dramatically reenact his heroic entrance. Veldora argued that if time remained frozen, he wouldn't be able to properly display his heroic image for the others to see. Dagruel was left utterly bewildered by this request. Veldora elaborated further, claiming that since both of them could move in the stop time, the time stop itself was now meaningless. He wanted Dagruel to restore the flow of time so that he could make a grand re-entrance and block Dagruel's punch in front of Luminous, just as he had done moments ago. Veldora earnestly hoped Dagruel would indulge him and allow him to repeat his heroic action. Dagruel was even more dumbfounded, unable to fathom Veldora's logic. Veldora explained that he had done some mischievous things in the past, upsetting Luminous. By leaving a good impression here, Veldora hoped to wipe the slate clean and have his past misdeeds forgiven. Dagruel, at a loss for words, didn't know how to respond to such ridiculousness. Nevertheless, as Veldora's longtime friend, Dagruel patiently humored him, much like one would humor a child. He told Veldora that he planned to end the time stop, but there was no reason for him to participate in a performance. Dagruel also noticed that Luminous and Ultima were slowly adapting to the stopped world. If he delayed any longer, his current advantage would soon disappear. In other words, his actions were inadvertently giving Luminous and Ultima time to grow stronger and gain experience. Thus, he wished to end the time stop quickly. However, Veldora, acting like a child begging for candy, stubbornly continued to push his request. Dagruel sighed in exhaustion. Meanwhile, Luminous, overhearing their conversation, understood Dagruel's frustration all too well. Her face turned bright red with anger, as she mentally vowed to teach this annoying lizard a lesson. If she could move, she would have kicked him by now. Veldora had relaxed completely, thinking that nothing could happen in the stop time, and had let his guard down, exposing his true feelings. Unfortunately, all of it was overheard by Luminous. She found herself increasingly infuriated by Veldora's carefree behavior, and was so angry that she felt she was about to regain movement herself. Amid this chaotic interplay between the free-spirited Veldora, the exasperated Dagruel, and the enraged Luminous, another significant change was taking place. Shion, who lay severely wounded on the ground, was beginning to stir. Shion deeply reflected on her situation. Although she once again felt regret and anger over her lack of power, This time she vowed not to lose control as she had before. She no longer harbored hatred for her enemies but instead used her soul to observe them. It's important to note that Shion diligently practiced Rimuru-sama's philosophy, no matter how absurd or difficult the task. This allowed her to intuitively perceive the essence of things through her soul. Good and evil held no significance to her. What mattered was how to subdue her opponent. Before the battle had even begun, Shion sensed the violent soul hidden beneath Dagruel's calm exterior, radiating an oppressive aura. Dagruel was perhaps the embodiment of the ultimate form Shion sought. The gap in their abilities was far too vast, making victory seem impossible, but Shion was not one to retreat. She trusted that Rimuru-sama's plan was always perfect, and that if she was placed here, it must have been for a reason. Unless Rimuru-sama gave another order, Shion would not back down. What surprised Shion the most was Luminous. The Queen of Nightmares had chosen to assist her. Logically, Luminous must have known there was no chance of victory in this battle, and Shion expected her to have fled long ago. However, Luminous remained by her side, recklessly fighting alongside her. Thanks to Luminous' aid, Shion had been able to hold on this long. Her view of Luminous had changed significantly, yet despite this, victory still seemed unattainable. In the end, during a moment of near death, time suddenly stopped, and Shion's consciousness hovered at the edge of a world drained of color. She couldn't let things end like this. She tried to roar with all her might, but her body didn't respond. She was frozen in place, unable to stand, speak, or move. Only her mind remained active, full of confusion. Shion's mind raced back to the moment the world lost its color. Whatever happened in that instant must have triggered this phenomenon, meaning if she could recreate that moment, she might break free. It was a ludicrous theory. Controlling time with a unique skill was something impossible. But such truths were unknown to Shion, and as far as she was concerned, if there was even a glimmer of hope, she had to try. Through her unique skill Master Chef, Shion began altering her body, continuously optimizing it with each adjustment. After countless attempts, Shion defied logic, gaining control over the stopped world. Although her eyes remained shut, and her body was heavily injured, her wounds began to open, blood flowing out continuously. Slowly, Shion's body awakened. She opened her bloodshot eyes and stood up like a ghost. In the world of stop time, even for those who understood the concept of time stop, no one should be able to bleed or experience physical changes. Yet Shion, through her master chef skill, had completely broken through the boundaries of the rules, transforming herself into an entirely incomprehensible state. In theory, Shion should have needed to grasp and manipulate Infan to move within the stopped world, but reality had taken a different turn. Shion had no idea what Infan even was. She merely observed the world through her soul and used Master Chef to alter her body, achieving a bizarre and mysterious state. Though the novel hasn't yet offered a deeper explanation for this phenomenon, it helps clarify why even Seal would be wary of Shion's ability. Seeing such an incomprehensible scene, Dagruel took a deep breath. Veldora, on the other hand, was worried that his moment of glory might be stolen. He loudly declared that it was still his time to shine. Just as Veldora was about to suggest that Shion take a break, Shion stated that Dagruel was her prey and requested that Veldora-sama allow her to handle him. At this moment, Shion was using her odachi as a cane, breathing heavily as she made her request. Veldora could only sigh and nod in resignation, further infusing Shion with his energy. Slowly, Shion regained her strength, happily waving her odachi, now ready to fight again. Alright, that's all for this video. Everyone may have noticed that the core of Volume 21 is focused on depicting the various characters during Rimuru's absence. As for Shion, among Rimuru's subordinates, only Shion has been marked by Seal as a potential threat capable of killing Rimuru. In this episode, Shion has started to fully demonstrate why Seal might have this perception. Keep in mind, because of her previous death, Shion has a much deeper connection with Seal than anyone else among Rimuru's followers. Shion was even aware of Seal's existence, and entrusted all of her self-optimization to Seal. However, in this episode, we witness Shion breaking the rules entirely through her own power, which is quite astonishing. Additionally, the chemistry between Veldora and Luminous is fascinating. Although Luminous seems to have a preference for girls, it feels like her interactions with Veldora suggest they are more compatible. How you guys feel? In our next episode, Shion and Dagruel will be locked in an intense battle within the stopped world. But what is the reason for this? After Dagruel releases the time stop, with Rimuru's disappearance, Shion's ultimate skill, Lord of Tyranny, which had been sealed by seal, will fully awaken. This skill is the bane of all spiritual lifeforms. Despite being pushed to the brink by Shion, Dagruel is still the stronger force. He will finally reveal his true form, as Mad King Ashura re-emerges into the world. The next episode will be very exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.